Welcome to the Sinister Side. No matter where in the world you're watching from or what time it is, drop a comment below and let us know. Before we dive into today's story, make sure to subscribe because the darkest secrets are revealed here first. Today, we're uncovering the chilling tale of the most beautiful slave in New Orleans, a woman whose unmatched beauty brought not just admiration but danger, obsession, and a legacy shrouded in mystery that still haunts history to this day. The story of New Orleans' most beautiful slave begins in a time when the city was a place of contrasts, a city of music, culture, and wealth, but also of shadows, secrecy, and unimaginable cruelty. The year was somewhere in the early 1800s, and New Orleans was a bustling port city, a melting pot where French, Spanish, African, and Creole cultures collided in a vibrant yet complex society. Amid the chaos and charm of this city, a child was born who would one day captivate the attention of everyone around her, from the poorest street urchin to the wealthiest plantation owner. Her origins were steeped in mystery even at birth, and whispers about her ancestry and appearance spread quietly, growing with each passing year. Born into slavery, she was immediately thrust into a life of hardship, limitation, and constant oversight. Yet from the earliest days of her childhood, there was something undeniably extraordinary about her. Even as a baby, people noted that she had an unusual beauty, a softness in her features, combined with a striking intensity in her eyes. It was said that her gaze seemed far older than her years, a quiet wisdom mingled with a natural curiosity about the world around her. Her skin carried a delicate hue, a subtle mixture that hinted at diverse ancestry, though no one could quite place it, and her hair fell in perfect dark waves, catching the light in a way that seemed almost magical. Among other enslaved children, she stood apart, not just because of her appearance, but because of a quiet confidence that radiated from her very presence. She did not cry incessantly like many infants, nor did she shy away from the chaotic world surrounding her. Instead, she observed everything with sharp intelligence, learning quickly the unspoken rules of life under bondage. Her earliest memories were filled with the duality of her existence, the beauty and fascination she inspired, juxtaposed against the harsh reality of her enslavement. From her earliest days, she witnessed the cruelty that shaped the lives of those around her, the lashings, the punishments, the endless labor that stole childhoods and innocence. But even in this harsh environment, she exhibited a quiet resilience. Those who cared for her, whether kindly fellow slaves or reluctant overseers, noticed her precocious understanding of human nature. She seemed to sense, even as a very young girl, who held power and who could be manipulated, who was cruel and who might offer a moment of kindness. Her survival instincts were sharp, honed by the need to navigate a world where one misstep could mean pain or worse. By the time she was a small child, her exceptional looks had begun to attract attention from beyond the enslaved community. Neighbors, visitors to the plantation, and even some of the wealthiest residents of the city would occasionally come to see her, drawn by tales of a child whose beauty seemed almost unreal. Some described her as having features that could rival the finest paintings of the European masters, delicate yet bold, soft yet arresting. Others whispered about the almost mystical quality of her presence, claiming that she had a way of holding a room's attention without speaking a word. These murmurs, passed from one person to another, slowly built a legend around her, even while she remained just a child, unaware of the larger forces that were already circling her life. Her upbringing was shaped largely by the other enslaved women around her, who became both her caretakers and her first teachers. They taught her the skills necessary to survive in a harsh world, how to cook and clean, how to anticipate the moods of the masters, and how to navigate the delicate, invisible hierarchies that existed among the enslaved population. But they also taught her stories of resilience, of secret strength, and of hope in the midst of oppression. These women were her guides in a world that was often unforgiving, and they recognized early on that she possessed a rare combination of intelligence, beauty, and charm that could shape her destiny, for better or worse. They warned her in quiet tones that her beauty could be both a gift and a curse, that it could bring admiration but also danger, and that the world beyond the plantation would be watching her long before she even realized it. As she grew older, her appearance became more pronounced, and the stories about her beauty grew with each passing year. By the time she reached school age, though her formal education was minimal at best, her awareness of her own allure began to emerge. She learned to walk and carry herself in a way that drew the eye, to speak softly but with intelligence, and to observe carefully the reactions of those around her. She noticed how men and women alike responded to her presence, and though she could not yet articulate it, she understood that her looks could shape interactions in ways that were both advantageous and dangerous. This understanding, coupled with her innate intelligence, made her unusually perceptive for her age. She began to recognize the subtle currents of desire, envy, and curiosity that swirled around her, and she instinctively learned how to navigate them. Her family life, or what passed for family under slavery, was complex. Records of her parents and siblings were sparse and often obscured by the brutal realities of the institution that held them in bondage. It is believed that her mother, herself of mixed ancestry, may have been instrumental in shaping her early understanding of survival, teaching her that appearances could be both protective and provocative. Her father, if he was present at all, left only a shadowy impression, a man whose own fate was tied to the whims of his masters. Despite the fragmented nature of her family, she developed a strong inner world, a sense of self that could not be entirely diminished by the cruelty surrounding her. This inner strength, combined with her external beauty, set the stage for the extraordinary life she was about to lead. Even as a young girl, she attracted attention not only for her looks but for her demeanor. There was a quiet sophistication in the way she carried herself, a maturity beyond her years that made adults take notice. Visitors to the plantation would comment on her poise, and some began to speculate on what she might become if she were ever freed, a dangerous topic in a society where slaves were considered property and such notions were often suppressed. Her beauty, always striking, became intertwined with the perception of her intelligence and grace, creating a combination that fascinated and unnerved those around her. Life, however, was far from easy. Every day brought new challenges, from the grueling work in the fields or kitchens to the constant scrutiny of overseers and masters. She learned early how to manage fear and pain, to hide vulnerability, and to use her presence to influence those who held power over her. Even in her play and childhood games, she demonstrated a cunning understanding of human behavior, often manipulating situations to her advantage in subtle ways that went unnoticed by adults. These early experiences honed her instincts and prepared her for the complex social world she would face as she grew into adolescence. Rumors about her beauty were not confined to the plantation. As she aged, they spread throughout the city, carried on whispers, gossip, and sometimes fear. Some claimed that her features were so exquisite that she seemed almost supernatural, a figure from another world who had been placed among them temporarily. Others speculated on her ancestry, suggesting that her beauty was the product of some rare genetic combination that could not be replicated. These stories, whether true or exaggerated, only increased the mystique surrounding her and drew more attention to her life. Visitors to New Orleans who heard the whispers made it a point to seek her out, curious to see the girl who had captivated so many minds and hearts. Despite her growing notoriety, she remained a child, and there were moments of innocence and joy. She played with other children when allowed, laughed in the sunlight, and occasionally experienced fleeting freedom in the small acts that were hers alone. These moments, however brief, were precious, providing her with glimpses of a life not entirely defined by bondage. They were also a time when she could begin to understand the power of her own presence, to recognize that she could affect the world around her in ways both subtle and profound. Her early life was a delicate balance between beauty and danger, innocence and awareness. Each day taught her lessons that many adults never learned, and she absorbed them quickly, storing knowledge and instincts that would serve her in the years to come. The fascination she inspired in others became part of her identity, an inescapable aspect of her existence. People admired her, envied her, feared her, and desired her, and she learned that each reaction carried meaning, a hint of how the world could respond to her in the future. By the time she approached her early teenage years, her beauty had blossomed fully, and the whispers of the city had transformed into an almost palpable reputation. Stories of the girl whose looks could stop a conversation or command attention in a room circulated widely, and the fascination was not limited to New Orleans alone. Visitors from nearby cities and towns came to glimpse her, and the legend of the most beautiful slave in the city grew with each passing year. Yet, even with all the attention, she remained aware of her limitations, understanding that her beauty could not free her from the chains of her circumstances, nor protect her from the dangers that lurked in every shadow. Her early life, though confined and often harsh, shaped her into someone extraordinary. She possessed an uncommon combination of intelligence, awareness, and charm, all wrapped in a beauty that seemed to defy the ordinary. Her childhood was a crucible, forging both the legend and the reality of the woman she would become. She learned lessons that others might never face, developed skills that were vital for survival, and cultivated a presence that would captivate everyone who encountered her. In this way, the early life of New Orleans' most beautiful slave was not only remarkable for her appearance, but also for the depth, intelligence, and resilience that underpinned it. By the end of her childhood, she had become a figure of fascination, whispered about in the city, envied and desired in equal measure, and already moving through life with a keen sense of her surroundings and the power she unknowingly held. Her story, which had begun in the shadows of slavery and hardship, was only beginning to unfold, setting the stage for the astonishing events, dangerous encounters, and dark allure that would define her adolescence and adult life. The early years of this extraordinary girl were the foundation of a life that would become legend, her beauty intertwined with both peril and power, in ways that would echo throughout New Orleans history for generations to come. As the years passed, the girl who had once been a quiet, observant child began to grow into a young woman whose presence could not be ignored. Her beauty, already striking in childhood, blossomed into a rare and almost dangerous allure. In New Orleans, a city alive with music, culture, and social intrigue, she became something of a legend long before her adulthood. People began to speak of her in hushed tones, passing along stories of the young woman whose appearance could captivate even the most hardened observer. The whispers began in the alleyways and markets, where those of modest means would describe her features with a mix of awe and envy. Her skin carried a flawless tone, a richness and glow that seemed impossible to achieve in the harsh realities of slavery. Her eyes, dark and penetrating, could fix upon a person with an intensity that made them feel exposed, as if she could peer directly into the depths of their souls. Her lips, full and shapely, were often the subject of admiration, while her hair, thick and lustrous, framed her face with a natural elegance that seemed effortless. Each movement she made, even a simple turn of the head or a quiet step along a dusty road, seemed to command attention, and those who encountered her often found themselves captivated before they realized why. Her beauty was not merely physical, there was an intangible quality to her presence that made her irresistible, It was a combination of intelligence, charm, and poise, all wrapped in an air of quiet confidence. She moved through the world with a self-assurance that belied her youth, and she had an uncanny ability to understand the desires, fears, and motivations of those around her. This awareness, developed from years of observing the delicate power dynamics of slavery, allowed her to wield her beauty in subtle but effective ways. She learned, almost instinctively, that a glance, a smile, or even a quiet nod could shift the moods of those around her, draw admiration, or deflect unwanted attention. It was a survival skill, honed over years of necessity, but it also became the source of her growing fame and notoriety. As she entered adolescence, her reputation began to spread beyond the confines of the plantation where she lived. Visitors to New Orleans, including merchants, traders, and the occasional wealthy socialite, would hear tales of the young woman, whose appearance was unlike anything they had ever seen. Curiosity drew them to the plantations, where they would catch glimpses of her in passing, often becoming silent witnesses to her quiet grace. These encounters, though brief, were enough to fuel further gossip and speculation, and soon her name, though never fully recorded, was spoken with a mixture of admiration and obsession throughout the city. It was said that to see her was to be marked forever, that her image would linger in the mind long after the encounter had ended. Despite her growing fame, her life remained firmly constrained by the harsh realities of slavery. She had no control over her circumstances, no ownership of her own time, and no legal protection against those who sought to exploit her beauty. Her days were filled with labor, from the kitchens to the fields, and she was subject to the whims of her masters and overseers, who sometimes treated her with cruelty and other times with calculated kindness. Yet even in this constrained existence, her allure became a form of quiet power. People were drawn to her, often bending rules or stretching boundaries just to be near her. Her presence could soften hearts, calm tempers, or ignite desire, and those who encountered her learned to approach her with a mixture of caution and reverence. The fascination she inspired was not limited to admiration, it also carried danger. Her beauty made her a target, and she quickly learned that appearances could provoke envy, obsession, and even violence. Men of influence, from wealthy plantation owners to ambitious politicians, saw her as a prize to be claimed, a symbol of status, power, and possession. Some attempted to woo her openly, offering gifts or favors to gain her favor, while others engaged in secret schemes to exert control over her life. The young woman learned to navigate these complexities with a careful blend of charm, intelligence, and caution, recognizing that any misstep could have devastating consequences. She understood that her beauty, while powerful, was a double-edged sword, capable of attracting both adoration and danger in equal measure. As her notoriety grew, so too did the social dynamics surrounding her. Within the enslaved community, she was a figure of admiration and inspiration, a symbol of beauty and resilience in a world that offered few opportunities for either. Her peers looked to her with a mix of awe and envy, recognizing that her presence had the power to influence interactions and perceptions. At the same time, she had to navigate the complex hierarchies of plantation life, where jealousy and competition could turn friends into rivals overnight. Every word she spoke, every gesture she made, carried weight, and she learned to be strategic, carefully managing her image and interactions to protect herself from those who might wish her harm. Beyond the plantation, her fame began to intersect with the social and cultural life of New Orleans. The city itself was a place of fascination, a hub of commerce, artistry, and intrigue, where appearances and reputation held immense value. Within this context, her beauty became a form of currency, a way to command attention, gain small concessions, or navigate a world that otherwise offered her little agency. People spoke of her in private gatherings, sharing stories of her features, her poise, and the quiet power she seemed to exert over everyone she encountered. Artists and portraitists took note, sketching her likeness in secret, while writers and chroniclers included veiled references to her in their accounts of the city's social life. Though she remained enslaved, her image began to transcend the limitations imposed upon her, becoming a legend that spread through whispers and rumors, carried by those who had glimpsed her beauty firsthand. Her growing reputation also brought complicated relationships with those in positions of authority. Some masters and overseers recognized her allure as a threat, fearing that it might incite jealousy, scandal, or even rebellion among other enslaved individuals or free citizens. Others saw it as an opportunity, a way to assert control or elevate their own social standing by association. She learned to read these motivations with remarkable insight, understanding who could be trusted, who could be manipulated, and who posed a danger to her safety. Every interaction became a lesson in strategy, a delicate balancing act between asserting her presence and protecting herself from exploitation. The city itself seemed to respond to her growing fame. Stories of her beauty reached even the distant corners of New Orleans, carried on the lips of travelers, merchants, and gossipers. She became a symbol of the allure and danger of the city itself, embodying the contradictions of a place where culture and cruelty existed side by side. People speculated on her future, imagining scenarios of freedom, wealth, or tragedy, though the reality of her life remained firmly constrained by the institution of slavery. This tension, the contrast between her extraordinary presence and her limited circumstances, added to the mystique surrounding her, fueling fascination and obsession in equal measure. Despite the constant attention, she retained a sense of agency within the confines of her environment. She understood the power of restraint, the importance of observation, and the subtle ways in which influence could be exerted without confrontation. Her beauty allowed her to capture attention effortlessly, but it was her intelligence and awareness that ensured she remained more than a mere object of desire. She learned to navigate the desires and ambitions of those around her, leveraging her reputation to secure moments of protection, kindness, or small freedoms in an otherwise oppressive world. Each encounter, each interaction became a careful study in human behavior, shaping her understanding of the complex social dynamics that would define her life in the years to come. Her notoriety was not without its challenges. As fascination with her grew, so too did the potential for danger. Men and women alike sought to possess her, sometimes through subtle manipulation, sometimes through overt attempts to control her life. She faced scrutiny, jealousy, and even threats from those who saw her beauty as an opportunity for personal gain. Yet she navigated these challenges with remarkable skill, maintaining a presence that was both captivating and cautious. She learned to project confidence and grace while remaining vigilant, understanding that her reputation, while powerful, could also place her at great risk. Even among her fellow enslaved individuals, she had to contend with complex dynamics. Admiration and envy coexisted, and she learned to cultivate relationships carefully, balancing friendship, loyalty, and self-protection. Her beauty, while a source of admiration, also attracted attention that could be dangerous, and she became adept at managing these interactions with subtlety and foresight. Through these experiences, she developed a nuanced understanding of human behavior, recognizing that power could take many forms and that even in a world defined by oppression, she could exert influence through perception, presence, and careful action. By the time she reached early adulthood, her reputation as the most beautiful slave in New Orleans was firmly established. Stories of her appearance and the fascination she inspired had spread throughout the city, reaching the ears of wealthy families, merchants, and social elites. She had become a figure whose presence could shift the mood of a room, whose glance could command attention, and whose reputation could shape perceptions long before she even entered a space. Yet despite the attention, she remained deeply aware of her limitations, understanding that beauty alone could not protect her from the harsh realities of her status. Her fame was both a gift and a burden, opening doors while also placing her in situations of risk, desire, and scrutiny that few could imagine. Her growing notoriety set the stage for the complex interactions and dangerous encounters that would define the next phase of her life. The fascination she inspired in others was not merely superficial, it carried implications for social status, power dynamics, and control, creating a web of intrigue that extended far beyond the boundaries of her immediate environment. She would have to navigate these currents with intelligence, strategy, and resilience, relying on the lessons she had learned in her youth to survive and thrive. Her rising fame was not just a matter of appearance, it was a reflection of her growing ability to influence, captivate, and endure in a world that constantly sought to exploit her. Even as her beauty became legendary, she retained a sense of self that was rare among those in her circumstances. She understood that her life was shaped by forces beyond her control, yet she also recognized the power inherent in her presence and awareness. Each encounter, each whispered compliment or envious glance, reinforced the duality of her existence, admired and desired on one hand, constrained and endangered on the other. This delicate balance became a defining aspect of her character, shaping her responses, her choices, and the way she carried herself through the intricate social landscape of New Orleans. Her life at this stage was a constant negotiation between the external fascination she inspired and the internal awareness of the dangers she faced. She was aware that the same qualities that drew admiration could also provoke envy and aggression. Every word she spoke, every movement she made, was a calculated act of self-preservation and subtle influence. Her beauty, while undeniable, was amplified by her intelligence, awareness, and quiet charisma, creating a presence that few could ignore and even fewer could control. In this way, the young woman's rising fame was not a mere accident of circumstance, it was a product of both her extraordinary appearance and her remarkable understanding of the world around her. She had learned to navigate the dangerous currents of desire, envy, and power with skill and subtlety, transforming her beauty from a simple trait into a form of influence and survival. Her notoriety spread throughout New Orleans and beyond, carried on whispers, stories, and occasional glimpses, ensuring that her legend would endure even as she continued to live under the harsh realities of slavery. By the time she reached the peak of her youth, her beauty and the fascination it inspired had transformed her into something more than a person. She had become a symbol, a living representation of allure, power, and danger in a society that both revered and oppressed her. The city itself seemed to recognize her presence, with merchants, visitors, and locals all acknowledging the aura she carried. Her story, already the subject of gossip and speculation, was now poised to enter the next chapter, one marked by dangerous encounters, power struggles, and the complex interplay between desire and control that would define her adult life. Her rise to fame in New Orleans was not just a tale of beauty, it was a story of resilience, strategy, and the ability to navigate a world that sought to exploit her at every turn. It was the foundation for the legend she would become, a precursor to the dangerous allure, social fascination, and complex relationships that would dominate the rest of her extraordinary life. As she grew into a young woman, the beauty that had already made her famous in New Orleans now became a magnet for attention, fascination, and, more dangerously, obsession. Her presence was no longer merely admired from a distance, it provoked direct encounters with men and women whose motives ranged from admiration to manipulation and outright control. These encounters were not simple social interactions. They were tests of her intelligence, poise, and survival instincts, and each one carried the potential for both peril and opportunity. The city itself, with its bustling streets, vibrant markets, and shadowed alleys, became a stage upon which her life unfolded, a place where danger and desire intersected in unpredictable and often threatening ways. The wealthy elite of New Orleans, particularly plantation owners, merchants, and influential politicians, soon realized the power that her beauty could wield, and many sought to claim her in ways that went far beyond casual admiration. For some, possessing her was a matter of pride, a way to assert dominance over their peers or to showcase their social standing. For others, it was a matter of personal obsession, a desire to bend her will and make her a symbol of their control. She quickly learned that these intentions could be both subtle and overt, ranging from carefully orchestrated gifts and favors to threats cloaked in polite conversation. Her survival depended on her ability to read the intentions of others, to anticipate danger, and to respond in ways that preserved both her dignity and her life. She became acutely aware that her beauty, while a source of admiration, also made her vulnerable. Men who were otherwise respected and powerful could become reckless in their pursuit of her attention, driven by jealousy, desire, or the belief that they had the right to claim what they wanted. In these encounters, she had to navigate a delicate balance. She needed to appear approachable enough to avoid outright aggression, yet guarded enough to prevent manipulation or harm. Her instincts, honed from years of careful observation, guided her actions, allowing her to survive encounters that might have overwhelmed a less perceptive individual. She learned the subtle art of control, using her beauty not merely as a passive trait, but as a tool to influence and negotiate within a dangerous social landscape. The men who sought her were not the only threats she faced. Rivalries among women, both enslaved and free, often posed equally complex challenges. Jealousy could erupt into gossip, sabotage, or even physical confrontation, and she had to navigate these relationships with skill and tact. Some women sought to undermine her reputation, spreading false stories or attempting to manipulate her into situations that could compromise her safety. Others, recognizing her extraordinary presence, became allies of convenience, supporting her publicly while quietly advancing their own interests. These interactions were fraught with tension, requiring constant awareness and careful calculation. She learned to observe expressions, tone, and body language, understanding that every gesture could carry hidden meaning and every interaction could shift the balance of power in subtle yet significant ways. Her encounters with the wealthy and influential often carried high stakes. Invitations to social gatherings, dinner parties, and private salons became opportunities for both admiration and danger. These events were filled with subtle power plays, whispered conversations, and unspoken expectations. She learned to navigate these spaces with a combination of grace, caution, and strategic charm, understanding that her reputation was as much a tool as her beauty itself. To misstep in these arenas could result in scandal, coercion, or worse, yet she moved with a confidence that drew attention while protecting her from the most overt threats. Each encounter was a lesson, a test of her ability to balance desire, fear, and strategy, and she emerged from these experiences with an ever-deepening understanding of the social forces that governed her world. The city of New Orleans itself seemed to conspire in the creation of both opportunity and danger. Its streets, filled with merchants, travelers, and socialites, became the backdrop for encounters that could elevate her reputation or threaten her safety. She was pursued through markets, courtyards, and alleys by those eager to see her, to speak with her, or to manipulate her in pursuit of their own goals. Some encounters were fleeting, a glance exchanged, or a whispered word, while others were prolonged, intense interactions in which power, desire, and strategy collided. Through it all, she learned to recognize patterns, to anticipate intentions, and to use her presence to navigate a world that was constantly in motion. Even within her own household, she faced complex power struggles. Overseers and masters, aware of her beauty and the fascination it provoked, sometimes sought to exploit her presence for their own advantage. They would place her in situations designed to test her obedience or to use her as a pawn in broader schemes of influence or control. She quickly understood that defiance could carry severe consequences, but submission was not always the path to safety either. She learned to read each situation carefully, to determine the motivations of those around her, and to respond in ways that minimized risk while preserving her autonomy as much as possible. These lessons, learned in the intimate and often oppressive confines of her household, prepared her for the increasingly complex social dynamics that awaited her beyond its walls. Her beauty also attracted attention from outsiders who sought to use it for personal gain. Wealthy merchants would attempt to gain her favor in hopes of securing advantageous deals with her masters. Politicians and influential citizens saw in her a symbol that could be leveraged for status or manipulation. Even ordinary citizens, drawn by rumors and stories, sought her out, hoping for a brief glimpse or interaction that might leave a lasting impression. Each encounter required her to maintain composure, to judge intent, and to respond with a combination of caution and subtle influence. Over time, she became remarkably adept at managing these interactions, turning her beauty into both a shield and a form of leverage, though always aware of the inherent risks. The intensity of her encounters increased as she matured. Men who had initially approached her with curiosity now pursued her with obsession, unable to reconcile the gap between admiration and possession. Some were subtle, offering gifts or favors in a calculated attempt to gain influence over her, while others were overt, attempting to assert control through intimidation, manipulation, or coercion. She encountered situations in which her physical presence was the only factor that could prevent aggression or enforce boundaries. Each interaction was a test, a negotiation in which the stakes were often life and death. Her ability to navigate these challenges became a defining aspect of her character, shaping the woman she would become and the legend she would inspire. Jealousy, obsession, and desire often intersected in ways that created intricate social entanglements. Some individuals sought to sabotage her, spreading false stories or attempting to manipulate her into compromising positions. Others attempted to form alliances, recognizing that proximity to her could confer social or economic advantage. She learned to manage these dynamics with precision, balancing friendship, caution, and strategy in a world where trust was a scarce and valuable commodity. Her experiences became a form of social education, teaching her to anticipate the actions of others, to read motivations with subtlety, and to act with both grace and determination. Despite the constant attention and danger, she maintained a remarkable sense of agency. She understood that her beauty was a form of power, but one that could only be wielded effectively if combined with intelligence, awareness, and strategic action. She learned to project confidence while remaining vigilant, to influence outcomes subtly while preserving her safety, and to navigate a world in which admiration and exploitation were often indistinguishable. Her encounters, though fraught with risk, became opportunities for her to develop a nuanced understanding of human behavior, power dynamics, and social manipulation. Some encounters were fraught with moral complexity. She was often placed in situations where her responses could affect not only her own fate, but also the lives of those around her. Decisions had to be made quickly, balancing survival with ethics, self-preservation with compassion, and caution with assertiveness. She became a master of subtlety, understanding that her actions, words, and even her expressions carried weight beyond the immediate moment. Each encounter was a lesson, reinforcing the importance of awareness, adaptability, and the careful negotiation of power in a world that constantly tested her limits. The interplay between desire and danger became a defining feature of her life. Those who pursued her were often driven by a mixture of admiration, envy, obsession, and ambition, creating interactions that were unpredictable and intense. She learned to anticipate the movements and intentions of those around her, to respond with calculated gestures, and to maintain a balance that allowed her to navigate both attention and threat. Her beauty, intelligence, and awareness combined to create a presence that was simultaneously captivating and protective, enabling her to survive encounters that might have overwhelmed others. Her reputation continued to grow, extending beyond the confines of New Orleans. Stories of her beauty, poise, and the fascination she inspired reached other towns, plantations, and even distant cities. Travelers and merchants carried accounts of her presence, amplifying the intrigue surrounding her. She became a symbol of allure, danger, and power, embodying both the fascination and the peril of a society that was obsessed with beauty and status, yet constrained by rigid hierarchies of race, class, and ownership. Her encounters, both personal and public, contributed to the legend that would endure long after her time. Through it all, she remained remarkably resilient. Each dangerous encounter, each attempt at manipulation or control, strengthened her understanding of the world and her ability to navigate it. She learned that beauty alone was not enough. It had to be paired with intelligence, strategy, and a keen awareness of human behavior. She developed an instinct for survival that allowed her to manage attention, deflect threats, and even influence outcomes in her favor. Her encounters with men and women of all social strata became a crucible, forging not only her reputation, but also her capacity for resilience, strategy, and self-preservation. Even when faced with extreme danger, she maintained a sense of dignity. She understood the stakes of each encounter and approached them with careful thought, ensuring that her responses preserved her autonomy and protected her from harm. Her ability to navigate these situations became a defining characteristic, illustrating both the power and the peril inherent in her extraordinary beauty. Each interaction was a lesson in negotiation, a demonstration of subtle influence, and a testament to her remarkable capacity for understanding and responding to the complex social dynamics that surrounded her. By the time she reached early adulthood, the dangerous encounters and intricate power struggles of her youth had shaped her into a woman of extraordinary awareness, resilience, and poise. She had learned to use her beauty as both shield and tool, to navigate desire and threat with remarkable skill, and to influence outcomes in ways that preserved her safety and dignity. Her reputation, already legendary, was now fortified by the knowledge that she could survive, and even thrive, amid the most perilous and complex social interactions. In this way, her life became a delicate balance of admiration and danger, influence and constraint, fascination and survival. Each encounter, each interaction, each challenge she faced contributed to the legend of the most beautiful slave in New Orleans, a figure whose presence commanded attention, inspired desire, and provoked fear. The dangerous encounters and power struggles she endured not only tested her abilities, but also revealed her remarkable capacity to navigate a world that sought to exploit her at every turn. Even after her life had passed into the shadows of history, the legend of the most beautiful slave in New Orleans continued to grow, expanding beyond the physical world into a realm of myth, mystique, and haunting fascination. Her story was no longer confined to the plantations where she had lived or the city streets where she had been glimpsed. It traveled through whispers, letters, and hushed conversations, leaving traces in the minds and hearts of all who heard it. The people who had known her in life, whether as admirers, rivals, or mere witnesses, carried her image forward, embellishing it with each retelling. Over time, her beauty became symbolic, a representation of both the allure and the danger of a society built upon power, wealth, and the harsh realities of slavery. She was remembered not simply as a person, but as an idea, a presence that transcended the limitations imposed on her during her life. Her legacy was multifaceted, intertwined with both fascination and caution. For some, she represented a cautionary tale of desire unchecked by morality, of a beauty so powerful it could inspire obsession, envy, and even destruction. Those who had encountered her, particularly the men and women whose lives had intersected with hers in complex and often dangerous ways, would tell stories of the profound impact she had on their thoughts, their decisions, and even their fates. They spoke of her eyes, which seemed to see far more than they revealed, and her movements, which conveyed confidence and intelligence in every gesture. Her beauty, so extraordinary, had become a lens through which others viewed the world, a reminder that appearances could carry influence beyond the ordinary, yet also provoke unforeseen consequences. Artists, writers, and chroniclers of New Orleans contributed to the preservation and amplification of her mystique. Some created sketches and portraits, attempting to capture her likeness with varying degrees of fidelity, yet all failed to fully encapsulate the intensity and depth of her presence. Writers and storytellers wove her into local folklore, their accounts tinged with exaggeration and drama, yet grounded in the undeniable reality of her existence. In each depiction, whether visual or literary, her beauty was magnified, her aura intensified, and the legend grew. Even generations later, descriptions of her continued to circulate, capturing imaginations far beyond the boundaries of her life. The city itself seemed to immortalize her, as if every street, courtyard, and shadowed alley had absorbed some fragment of her presence, leaving an invisible imprint that lingered long after she was gone. The mystique surrounding her life was enhanced by the scarcity of first-hand accounts. Few written records existed, and most documentation of her existence was filtered through the perspectives of those who were captivated by her beauty or affected by her presence. This scarcity of concrete evidence allowed the imagination to fill the gaps, transforming her life into a tapestry of myth, legend, and speculation. Stories emerged of her walking silently through the streets at dusk, of her gaze halting conversations, of her figure appearing as if illuminated by an otherworldly light. These tales, whether grounded in truth or entirely fictionalized, reinforced the notion that she was more than a person. She was an embodiment of fascination, desire, and the complexity of human attraction and obsession. Her legacy was not only tied to her beauty, but also to the resilience and intelligence she had demonstrated throughout her life. Even as she navigated the dangers, manipulations, and rivalries of her youth, she had maintained a sense of agency, preserving as much autonomy as the cruel structures of slavery would allow. Her ability to survive, adapt, and influence those around her became central to the stories told about her, elevating her beyond the status of a passive object of desire to that of a figure who wielded subtle power and strategic insight. In this way, her legacy was as much about her mind and presence as it was about her physical appearance. The combination of these qualities made her story unforgettable, a model of both the human capacity for resilience and the enduring allure of mystery. Over time, the mystique surrounding her life took on symbolic meaning. She became a representation of the contradictions inherent in New Orleans society, the blending of cultures, the coexistence of beauty and brutality, and the ways in which desire and power were often intertwined. Her story highlighted the complexity of human behavior, illustrating how admiration could coexist with exploitation, how fascination could lead to both protection and danger, and how beauty, while celebrated, could never fully shield an individual from the harsh realities of systemic oppression. Through these symbolic dimensions, her life transcended personal experience, becoming a lens through which future generations could examine the social, cultural, and moral dynamics of the era. The ghost of her presence lingered long after she had disappeared from public view. Some claimed to see her in fleeting glimpses, a shadow at the edge of a courtyard, a figure on a distant balcony, or a silhouette moving through the misty streets of the French Quarter. These sightings, whether imagined or real, became part of the folklore that surrounded her, reinforcing her status as a figure both tangible and ethereal. People whispered that her spirit embodied both beauty and warning, that her gaze could still pierce those who had once been captivated by her, and that her presence reminded the city of the delicate balance between fascination and danger. In this way, her legacy evolved from the historical to the mythological, occupying a space where reality and imagination intertwined. Her mystique was also fueled by the selective nature of the stories that survived. Accounts often focused on her interactions with powerful men and women, her ability to command attention, and the subtle influence she exerted in social settings. These narratives emphasize the extraordinary aspects of her life while omitting the mundane realities of daily existence, creating an idealized version of her that both inspired admiration and heightened the sense of danger that surrounded her story. The absence of comprehensive documentation allowed the imagination to fill in the gaps, resulting in a portrait of a woman whose beauty, intelligence, and presence were amplified to almost mythical proportions. Despite the mythologizing of her life, there were tangible consequences of her presence and influence. People who had been drawn into her orbit, whether through desire, rivalry, or political maneuvering, found their lives altered by the encounters, decisions, and choices shaped by her influence. Some experienced heartbreak, jealousy, or scandal. Others gained advantage or protection by aligning themselves with her. Her life demonstrated the profound impact that an individual could have within a tightly constrained social hierarchy, revealing how presence, perception, and subtle strategy could shape outcomes in ways both extraordinary and unpredictable. Her legacy was further complicated by the racial and social dynamics of New Orleans. As a slave of remarkable beauty, she occupied a space that was both visible and restricted, admired and objectified. Her interactions with the free population, particularly the elite, highlighted the stark inequalities and dangers of the society in which she lived. She could inspire desire, command attention, and influence perception, yet she remained subject to the whims and control of those who held legal and economic power over her. The tension between admiration and constraint, fascination and vulnerability, became a defining aspect of her story, emphasizing the complex interplay of race, gender, and power that underpinned the society of the time. Even as centuries passed, her story continued to resonate, a testament to the enduring power of myth, legend, and fascination. Historians, writers, and folklorists would revisit her tale, drawn by the combination of beauty, resilience, and mystery that defined her existence. Each retelling contributed to the amplification of her legend, reinforcing the perception of her as both a real person and a figure of almost supernatural allure. In this sense, her legacy was self-perpetuating, growing over time as each generation added its own interpretations, embellishments, and reflections to the narrative. The mystique surrounding her life also influenced cultural memory in subtle ways. She became a symbol of the complex dynamics of desire, power, and survival in a society built on oppression. Her story illustrated how admiration and obsession could coexist with cruelty, how beauty could be both empowering and dangerous, and how the lives of individuals could reverberate far beyond their immediate circumstances. Through these dimensions, she became more than a historical figure. She became a lens through which the moral, social, and psychological aspects of her era could be examined and understood. Even in literature and artistic expression, she remained a source of fascination. Writers would use her as inspiration for characters who embodied both allure and danger, while painters sought to capture the intensity of her presence on canvas. Poets and storytellers wove her into narratives that explored themes of obsession, power, and the fragile nature of freedom. Her influence extended beyond her lifetime, shaping perceptions of beauty, resilience, and social navigation in ways that continued to resonate long after the era of slavery had ended. Her legacy was also a reflection of the enduring human fascination with the unknown. The gaps in her biography, the mysteries surrounding her life, and the uncertainty about her ultimate fate contributed to the ongoing intrigue. People were drawn not only to her beauty, but also to the enigmatic aspects of her existence, where she had come from, how she navigated the dangers of her environment, and what became of her in the end. These unanswered questions created a sense of allure and suspense, ensuring that her story would remain compelling across generations. Even today, her mystique endures, captured in tales of haunted streets, whispered legends, and historical accounts that hint at her extraordinary presence. Tourists and locals alike speak of the beauty that once walked the streets of New Orleans, of the gaze that could silence a room, and of the subtle power that influenced those around her. In this way, her life transcends history, occupying a space where reality, legend, and imagination converge. Her story is not merely a record of the past, but a living memory, a reminder of the complex interplay between beauty, influence, and survival. Her legacy also carries a moral dimension, a reflection of the societal inequalities and dangers that shaped her life. She was admired, feared, and desired, yet she remained constrained by the institution of slavery, a constant reminder of the limitations placed upon individuals by power, race, and circumstance. Her story forces reflection on the ways in which society values beauty, manipulates desire, and punishes autonomy. In doing so, her legacy transcends her personal narrative, offering insights into the broader human condition and the historical forces that continue to influence contemporary understanding of power, attraction, and resilience. The mystique surrounding her life, therefore, is not merely a product of legend. It is a testament to the enduring impact of an individual whose beauty, intelligence, and resilience transcended the limitations imposed upon her. She became a symbol of fascination, a figure whose presence could inspire awe, fear, and admiration simultaneously. Her story endures as a reflection of human complexity, societal contradictions, and the ways in which individuals navigate desire, danger, and power in a world that often seeks to limit them. Even centuries after her life, the most beautiful slave in New Orleans remains a subject of fascination, a reminder of both the extraordinary potential and the inherent vulnerabilities of human existence. Her legacy, woven through history, folklore, and cultural memory, continues to captivate, inspiring admiration and reflection in equal measure. She is remembered not only for her beauty, but for the subtle power, intelligence, and resilience that defined her life, ensuring that her story will endure as a haunting, unforgettable chapter in the history of New Orleans and the broader narrative of humanity itself. The story of the most beautiful slave in New Orleans is not merely a tale of allure, obsession, or fascination. It is also a narrative that carries profound lessons about the human condition, power, and morality. Beneath the glamour and mystique of her beauty lies a harsh and unflinching reality that reflects the brutality and complexity of a society built on slavery, inequality, and oppression. Her life forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the intersection of desire and control, the fragility of autonomy under systems of oppression, and the ways in which human behavior is shaped by circumstance, ambition, and survival instincts. Each chapter of her life offers insight, not only into her extraordinary experience, but also into the timeless dynamics of power, resilience, and moral ambiguity. One of the most immediate lessons from her story is the intricate interplay between power and perception. Her beauty, which in ordinary circumstances might have been a source of personal empowerment, became a tool and a weapon in a society where autonomy was limited. The attention she received was never neutral. It carried expectations, obligations, and dangers. Those who sought to possess her attention, whether men of influence, rival women, or opportunistic observers, viewed her as both an object and a symbol. In navigating this environment, she learned to wield perception as a form of subtle influence, using poise, intelligence, and awareness to assert some measure of control over interactions that could otherwise have been entirely dictated by others. This teaches us that power is often less about formal authority and more about perception, influence, and the ability to navigate complex social dynamics. Even in the absence of legal or formal rights, she demonstrated that strategic action, careful observation, and self-awareness can be a form of resistance, a method of asserting agency in a world designed to strip it away. Her story also illuminates the moral ambiguities inherent in human relationships. The fascination she inspired among others was not purely admiration. It was frequently entangled with exploitation, obsession, and desire for control. People's responses to her beauty ranged from genuine respect to selfish manipulation, and she had to navigate this spectrum daily. In doing so, she learned to recognize the difference between outward appearances and true intentions, between flattery and threat, between generosity and self-interest. Her life forces reflection on how human relationships are often shaped by competing desires, ambitions, and fears. It challenges us to consider the ways in which admiration, envy, and obsession can distort interactions, creating environments where trust is fragile and every action carries consequences that extend far beyond the immediate moment. Another lesson emerges from the constant danger that accompanied her notoriety. While her beauty opened doors, it also placed her in situations of extreme vulnerability. Men and women alike attempted to manipulate, coerce, or control her, and she had to develop a keen sense of situational awareness to survive. The stakes were often life and death, and each decision required careful judgment, strategic calculation, and sometimes moral compromise. Her ability to navigate these threats illustrates a fundamental lesson about resilience and adaptability. Survival often depends on the capacity to assess risk, anticipate the actions of others, and respond with intelligence and subtlety. In this sense, her life is a study in the art of negotiation, demonstrating how survival under oppressive conditions demands not only courage, but also psychological acuity, emotional intelligence, and strategic foresight. Her story also exposes the corrosive effects of systems that commodify human beings. She was celebrated for her beauty, yet that very admiration was entangled with ownership, exploitation, and control. Her physical presence became a currency in a society that measured individuals by their utility, status, or appearance, and the fascination she inspired was inseparable from the constraints imposed upon her by slavery. This tension teaches us about the dehumanizing consequences of social and economic systems that reduce individuals to objects or symbols. It reminds us that admiration, desire, or attention is never purely benign when it is wielded within structures of inequality. Her life serves as a cautionary tale about the fragility of agency in environments where systemic power shapes every interaction, decision, and relationship. Her interactions with both enslaved peers and members of the free population provide further insight into social dynamics and human behavior. Within the enslaved community, her beauty inspired admiration, envy, and sometimes rivalry. Among the free population, she became a symbol of fascination, desire, and status. In both spheres, she had to navigate a complex web of expectations and perceptions, learning to protect herself while exerting influence wherever possible. This teaches us that human relationships are rarely straightforward. They are influenced by social hierarchies, personal ambitions, insecurities, and desires. Her ability to navigate these interactions highlights the importance of emotional intelligence, careful observation, and strategic engagement, skills that remain relevant in both historical and contemporary contexts. Her story also carries lessons about the limits of physical beauty and external perception. While her appearance captivated and commanded attention, it could not shield her from the realities of oppression, inequality, or danger. Beauty, while powerful, is not a guarantee of security or freedom, and her life demonstrates that external admiration often comes with hidden costs. This is a reminder that personal value cannot be measured solely by outward traits, and that true agency often requires inner resilience, intellect, and strategic action. Her experience underscores the idea that influence and survival in a complex world depend on more than appearance. They require insight, foresight, and adaptability. Her experiences further illuminate the psychological impact of constant surveillance and societal scrutiny. Every movement she made, every glance, and every interaction was observed, judged, and interpreted by others. This omnipresent attention could be flattering, but also suffocating, creating a heightened sense of vulnerability and responsibility. Her ability to maintain composure and assert influence under such pressure provides a lesson about the human capacity to adapt to intense scrutiny, to develop self-awareness, and to transform observation into strategic advantage. It is a reminder that resilience often involves not only physical survival, but also psychological mastery, an ability to understand and anticipate the intentions of others while protecting one's own interests and integrity. Another lesson emerges from the ways in which her legacy has been interpreted over time. The mythologizing of her life demonstrates how narratives are shaped by perception, memory, and imagination. Over the years, her story has been retold, embellished, and reframed, creating a figure who is both historical and symbolic. This teaches us that history is not merely a record of facts, it is a living process, shaped by storytellers, observers, and cultural memory. It reminds us to consider how narratives are constructed, whose perspectives are represented, and how interpretation can amplify certain traits while obscuring others. Her story, therefore, provides insight not only into the past, but also into the ways in which collective memory and storytelling shape our understanding of human experience. Her life also offers lessons about the intersection of desire, morality, and social structure. She lived in a world where beauty and charm could provoke intense desire, yet that desire was often entwined with control, exploitation, and moral ambiguity. Navigating this environment required not only survival instincts, but also ethical discernment, strategic thinking, and the ability to manage complex interpersonal dynamics. Her experiences reveal the ways in which attraction and power interact, how morality can be challenged by circumstances, and how personal agency can be exercised even within restrictive systems. These lessons remain relevant across time, offering insight into the ethical and practical challenges of navigating relationships, influence, and social structures in any era. Her resilience in the face of danger and manipulation provides a profound lesson about human strength. Despite the constant threats to her autonomy, she survived and maintained a sense of self that was remarkable given the oppressive circumstances in which she lived. She demonstrated that resilience is not merely physical endurance, it is also mental, emotional, and strategic. Her ability to assess situations, anticipate threats, and respond effectively illustrates the multidimensional nature of human survival and agency. Her story encourages reflection on the capacities for adaptation, problem-solving, and self-preservation that exist even under extreme constraints. Additionally, her life highlights the long-lasting impact of individual presence and influence. Even decades and centuries later, she continues to captivate imaginations, inspire storytelling, and provoke reflection on the social and moral complexities of her era. This demonstrates that individual lives, even those constrained by systemic oppression, can leave enduring legacies that resonate far beyond their immediate circumstances. Her story is a reminder that influence is not always formal or institutional. It can be subtle, personal, and enduring, carried forward through memory, narrative, and cultural imagination. Her experiences also teach us about the moral responsibility of observers and society. Those who admired her, exploited her, or attempted to control her played a role in shaping the trajectory of her life. Their actions and intentions reflect broader societal values and failures, illustrating how individuals are affected by systemic norms, expectations, and hierarchies. By studying her life, we are reminded to consider our own role within social systems, the ways in which we respond to power, and the moral implications of our actions toward others. Her story serves as a mirror, reflecting both individual and collective responsibility in the perpetuation or mitigation of harm. Her legacy emphasizes the importance of historical awareness and critical reflection. By examining her life, we gain insight into the complexities of slavery, social hierarchy, desire, and human behavior. Her story challenges simplistic narratives of beauty or victimhood, presenting instead a nuanced portrait of a person navigating extraordinary circumstances with intelligence, resilience, and subtle influence. This teaches us the value of careful observation, empathy, and critical thinking when interpreting historical events, as well as the need to consider multiple perspectives in understanding human experience. Ultimately, the life of the most beautiful slave in New Orleans is a lesson in the human capacity to endure, adapt, and influence, even under extreme constraints. It teaches us that beauty, while powerful, is inseparable from context, that admiration can coexist with danger, that influence requires intelligence, awareness, and strategy, and that survival often demands both psychological and emotional resilience. Her story encourages reflection on the enduring dynamics of power, desire, and morality, offering insights that extend far beyond her own time and place. Her narrative also reminds us that historical figures, especially those marginalized by society, often leave complex legacies that are not fully captured by conventional records. Her story blends fact, interpretation, and legend, illustrating how memory, culture, and imagination contribute to our understanding of the past. This teaches us to approach history with both curiosity and critical thinking, to question assumptions and to recognize the ways in which stories can evolve over time while retaining kernels of truth and insight. Finally, her life underscores the profound human capacity for dignity, resilience, and strategic awareness in the face of systemic oppression. Despite the dangers, objectification, and social constraints she faced, she maintained a presence and influence that continue to inspire fascination and reflection centuries later. Her story encourages us to consider the ways in which individuals navigate complex social landscapes, protect their autonomy, and exert influence even in environments designed to limit them. In this sense, the lessons of her life remain both timeless and urgently relevant, offering insight into power, morality, resilience, and the enduring human spirit.